Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. I'm so glad you're here. And today I'm going to make a drawstring backpack, and I know I've made some in the past, but this is the one that I've been working up to because this one is going to have water bottle holders. So I'm basing this on the same pattern that I used for the last two backpacks, and I'll include a link in the description. But then I've completely remade the front of it, and this is based on a drawstring backpack that I own by Adidas. So what I have here is this beautiful teal fabric, which I did get on Amazon, and I'll include a link in the description. And this is going to be the front and the back fabric for the backpack. So I'm going to cut two pieces of this fabric, which are 18 inches by 16 inches. Now we're going to put almost a triangle shape on the front. And I'm going to cut out, again, I am going to just cut out an 18 by 16 inch rectangle from this black fabric. This is my Becca Canvas Marine fabric, which I also picked up at Amazon, and it's a nice, stiff, it seems waterproof fabric. I like this for bags because it's so tough. So I'm going to cut an 18 by 16 inch rectangle out of this as well, and then we're going to cut it into almost a triangle shape. I'm also going to need a piece of lining, and I decided to use ripstop nylon for the lining for this part. I'm not using the ripstop for the lining inside the bag, although you certainly could. I have in the past. I just didn't have enough of it left. But because I was a little worried about how thick this was going to get on the front, I decided to use the ripstop nylon here. So I'm also going to cut an 18 inch by 16 inch rectangle out of that, and that is a lining fabric. Alright, so once I have those pieces, I am going to taper the black piece that's going on the front, so that's going on top of the teal piece, and also the lining piece. So these are 16 inches wide. What I'm going to do is go 5 inches in from each side, so I'll have 6 inches across the top, and then I'm just going to draw or cut a line from that 5-inch mark down to the bottom corner. So it's not quite a triangle because it's going to have a flat top, and I'm going to do that again for the black piece and the lining piece. We're going to do the front of this first, then we'll cut other pieces and put the whole thing together. So I'm going to put the zipper on the front first. So what I have here is some zipper by the yard, and I'm actually just sort of eyeballing where I want that to go on this. So based on where I want it, I cut a piece of the zipper that's about 10 inches long, but it is going to end up quite a bit smaller than that. We're going to put zipper tabs on this. And I thought I would just show you again how to put a zipper onto this because I was quite challenged when I first tried to do it. So just open it up a little bit at one end, and then you're going to use the rounded end of the zipper pull, which is separated in the middle, and put that down onto one side and then finagle it onto the other side. It was a little difficult for me to do this sort of in midair in front of the camera, but then once I had it on both sides, I laid it down on the table and held the end where the zipper was, and I was able to pull the zipper tab along the zipper. While I'm cutting big pieces, I'm also going to cut the two lining pieces for the inside of the bag, and these are a cotton blend broadcloth fabric, but it's pretty lightweight. And I also got this on Amazon. I'll include links to all the fabric and the zippers in the description. So these I'm cutting just not quite as long as the front and back pieces. These are 16 inches by 17 3/4 inches, and I'm cutting two of those, one for the front of the lining and one for the back of the lining. All right, now back to the front and the zipper. So I positioned that a little bit more carefully on the front to figure out exactly where I wanted it. And then I pinned it where I wanted the zipper to start and end. I'm going to use a leftover scrap from that cotton blend broadcloth fabric to make the zipper tabs for this. And my zipper is 1 1/4 inches wide. So to make a zipper tab for that, I'm going to need a piece that's 2 times 1 1/4, so 2.5 inches plus a seam allowance. And for mine, I have quite a large seam allowance because I just find it easier to have something on both sides of the needle when I'm sewing. So that's quite large, but I'm going to sew it at the 1 1/4 plus a little bit mark. So I'm going to cut that, and my zipper tab is going to be quite short. I don't need a long zipper tab, but I'm also just working with the scraps that I have left over, which is pretty small. So it's only maybe 1.5 inches tall. Normally I would probably make it a little bit bigger, but this is fine because, again, most of it's going to end up cut off anyway. So once I've cut that piece, you fold over the top 1/4 inch, and I press that down, and then fold it in half with that folded over part, that's the inside of this, outwards. And then you can sew that seam down. You're going to make that the width of your zipper. I always add just a tiny bit extra so I can slide this over the zipper easily. And then you place that over the zipper with the folded side in towards the center of the zipper, with the seam along the zipper on the back, and we're going to stitch it where we want our zipper to end. So stitch over that and then pull it right side out. And I'll include a link in the description to a really nice tutorial on how to make this kind of zipper tab, in case it's difficult to see what I'm doing or I didn't explain it very well. But I'm going to do that for both ends of my zipper. Now I'm then going to position that on that front triangle piece where I want it to be, and then flip it face down on the bottom of the piece. And I'm going to sew a seam. So I'm just going to sew it right down along the top of the zipper to my front piece. And once that's sewn together, I'm going to cut my front piece right at the top of the zipper. And I'm going to fold it out. So press it so that it's a little bit flat there. And then I'm going to attach the top piece of the triangle to the top of the zipper, right sides together, the top piece down, so I can sew another seam and sew the top piece to the zipper. And then I opened that up, pressed that open, and I widened my stitch width to 4 millimeters, and I stitched a top stitch over that on the top and the bottom. And then I just squared that up with the lining piece, because it is important that those pieces are the same, and cut off the ends of the zipper tabs. You can see there's almost nothing left of the zipper tab at this point. Now I want to put an old racing bib on this backpack. This is the racing bib from my first marathon. I've only run 2, but this marathon was special and it was in Newport. And this racing bib is a sort of light turquoise color. It's just really beautiful. I picked the fabric to match it. So I am going to sew my racing bib to the front of this. Of course, you don't have to do this step. Maybe you want to put another little pocket here or something that sits on the outside. But this is what I'm going to do, and I'll just briefly explain how I did it. This racing bib is actually sticky on the back, so that was helpful for me. So I just positioned it so it was basically centered on the front, and then because I don't trust myself to sew straight lines, I drew a line 1/4 inch in with a pencil from each edge of the bib, and then just stitched all the way around with a straight stitch. And then I set my stitch width to, I think 1.5 millimeters, and did a zigzag stitch all the way around the edge of it just to hold the edge down. Now, racing bibs are made of Tyvek usually. This one is. So, well, actually, I don't know. But this was over 10 years ago. They might make them of something different now, but all of mine are made of either Tyvek, or I think I even have some that are paper. So you want to be careful not to iron that, because it will wrinkle up. And when I'm ironing, I'm also careful of my zippers, which are plastic, because I don't want to melt them. So a few little things we have to be careful about with ironing here. Okay, so that front piece is all ready now. Now I'm going to do a couple of more things to get the whole front put together. So with that lining piece, what we're going to do is sew that down the middle to the front piece of the backpack, so the patterned piece. So I'm just going to put that onto the front piece of the backpack and pin it down, draw a line right down the center. And this is for those water bottle pockets. So this will separate the two water bottle pockets. So when you put something in there, it doesn't just completely fall through to the other side. Then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some seam binding to attach the two pieces together, the lining, the triangular pieces, the lining and the front piece. And I'm just going to make this out of that broadcloth fabric. I did a prototype of the front of this to figure out how to put it together. And on the prototype, I used some black webbing that I had used to make a lanyard, but that was very, very difficult to fold, and it was very stiff and bulky. And what I don't want is to add more bulk to this. So I seem to have lost some footage where I cut these pieces, but basically I decided that I wanted it to be a little bit wide, so about 3/4 of an inch wide on either side, because I was worried about my two pieces not lining up perfectly. So I didn't want to skimp on this and possibly end up not catching one of these when I sew it. So I'm multiplying that by 4, and I'm cutting a 3-inch wide piece of the broadcloth, and I didn't have a long enough piece of the broadcloth to give me everything I needed, so I ended up cutting 2 3-inch wide pieces of the broadcloth, and then I folded that in half and ironed it, and then I folded each end in towards the middle and ironed it. So basically just made myself some bias tape or seam binding. And now I'm just clipping that to the front piece. But after we sew the seam down the middle of the lining and the rectangular front piece, then we're going to clip the two pieces together. I was just clipping it on to see if it was the right size and everything before I got to that point. So we're going to do a straight stitch, and we're going to sew the lining to the front piece. And then I'm going to take my front triangular piece with the pocket, and I'm going to wrap the seam binding around that and the lining piece and clip that together. And now we're just going to sew those on, and of course you want to be careful to make sure you are not also sewing to that front piece. So I did 2 stitches, one down the inside and one down the outside, and I just did this really slowly and tried to make my stitches straight. Now for the water bottle holders, I bought this sort of netting, and I think I got this at Joann's. I bought a lot of this fabric last year. It's only now that I've gotten up the courage to try to figure out how to make this bag and to make it. So this stuff is a little bit difficult to sew. So what I ended up doing was I cut 2 rectangular pieces. And if you're more efficient and more confident, you can probably cut 1 rectangular piece and then cut it at the diagonal and use it on each side. But I was not feeling confident about that. So I just cut rectangular pieces, and I didn't want this to be even with the zipper just because of bulk. So the water bottle pockets are higher than the zipper. Now I cut the rectangular pieces, and for one of them, I have the selvage on one side where it's sort of rolled up and finished. So I'm not worried about that. But on the sides that I need to sew, so the top and the side of the one that doesn't have selvage, I'm not worried about the outside so much, but the insides. What I did was I folded them over twice and ironed them. And that gave me a lot more bulk and fabric for the thread to catch onto when I was sewing it. So the first thing I did was sew my seam binding across the top of those. And I did the same as before. I did 2 stitches, one near the top and one near the bottom of the seam binding. Once I had done that, I lined them up, and at first I lined them up relative to the top of the bag. Then I made sure that they were lined up relative to the zipper, and fortunately they were, because I think if those measurements aren't the same, you probably want to line them up relative to the zipper. Because they're in such close proximity to the zipper, I think that it's going to look funny if they don't look like they're the same distance above the zipper. So after I got them lined up, I pinned them to that seam binding, and then I just sewed over my 2 seams that are on the seam binding on the triangular piece to stitch this to the triangular piece. Again, making sure we don't sew it to the patterned piece in the back. Now, I actually did buy some elastic because originally I was thinking I was going to use elastic for the water bottle holders. But again, I'm basing this part of the bag on an Adidas bag that I have, and it does not have elastic for those water bottle holders, and they work just fine. I think because they're tall and they're big pockets. So you could certainly put elastic here, and so what I would recommend is you want the elastic piece to be the size of from the edge of the bag to the edge of the triangle when it's stretched. And that should be a nice piece of elastic that will hold your bottle in place if you're worried about that. Once I had that all stitched together, and I was confident that it actually was stitched together, I trimmed off the inside of that netting. All right, now that was really the hard part. We're almost done. So now from that marine canvas fabric, I'm going to cut 2 pieces that are 14 inches long by 4 inches high, and this is for us to thread the rope through at the top, and 2 pieces that are 3 inches by 4 inches, and those are for us to thread the cording through at the bottom because it's a drawstring bag, so the string. So we're going to cut those, and then for the 2 pieces that are 14 inches by 4 inches, you're just going to fold the short end over 1/4 inch twice, press that, and stitch it. For the 2 pieces that are 3 inches by 4 inches, we're going to fold them in half and then fold the 2 ends in and then fold it again. So just like when we made the seam binding, and you're going to do that the long way. So fold it in half the 3-inch way, so you're folding it at 1.5 inches. And then you're going to stitch it the long way on each side. Now I did want to put a zipper pocket on the inside, and I could have used that same broadcloth fabric that I used for the lining, but I have this scrap of blue fabric that I just love that I think goes well with this bag, so I'm going to make this the pocket lining for the inside pocket. So it's a scrap of fabric, so I'm just going to square it off so I have a rectangle. Now this piece of fabric has a right side and a wrong side. So on the wrong side, 2 inches down from the top and 1 inch in from either side, I'm going to make a rectangle that is 1/2 inch tall, and I'm going to draw a line horizontally through that rectangle, and then I'm going to draw like a little triangle on either end. Then I'm going to center that on one of my inner lining pieces about 2 inches down, and I'm going to sew all the way around that rectangle. Then I'm going to cut through both pieces of fabric along the center line of the rectangle and along the triangles so that I'm cutting right up to the stitching, and then I'm going to push that fabric through the hole and iron it as flat as I possibly can. And what I decided when I ironed it was to leave just a tiny little edge of the blue showing. I just thought that it looked kind of cute that way. If I had had bright blue thread, I would have sewn around it with bright blue thread as well, but I didn't. So once I had done that, what I have here is just a zipper. It's slightly smaller than the zipper by the yard, and I think I bought 60 of these black zippers, so I figure I may as well use it. So I just lined that up behind the hole and pinned it in place and trimmed off the end of the zipper because the zipper is, 12 or 14 inches, much longer than I need. I didn't actually even stitch the zipper before I did that because I'm going to be sewing the zipper down, so I'm going to be sewing all the way around the zipper, so I've just backed over it a few times at the end there when I sewed around the zipper. And that was a little messy. I definitely could have done better with this. I don't think it really matters because you can't see it because it's inside the lining of the bag, or between the bag and the lining. But I wasn't super pleased with how this came out, but it was okay. Once the zipper is sewn on, you're going to fold the pocket up and sew all the way around the pocket, although I didn't sew the bottom because there was a fold there, and you just want to be careful not to accidentally sew that to the lining. So now we do have all of our pieces. So what we're going to do now is we're going to baste those little tabs on at the bottom. So I decided to baste those onto the back piece, and we put them on 2.5 inches up from the bottom. And we're also going to, I'm going to clip everything together and then sew it. So we're also going to take those casings for the top and fold them wrong sides together and clip them upside down to the top of the front and the back, centered. And then we're going to put the lining over that, clip that all together. So at the top we've got a sandwich, lining, casing, back piece, or lining, casing, front piece. I wanted my pocket to be on the back of the bag, so I put the lining piece with the pocket on the back of the bag. And once those are all clipped together, I basted on the 2 little tabs at the bottom, and then we stitch the top, and these are 1/2 inch seam allowances. So stitch the top, and I debated whether to do a top stitch over that, open it up. I did open it up, pressed it, debated a top stitch, and then I thought the top stitches might not line up when I put the bag together, so maybe I would top stitch it after I sewed the whole bag together. So to sew the whole bag together, we're going to lay the pieces out. So let's say we lay out the front of the bag and the front of the bag lining opened up, and then we put the back of the bag and the back of the bag lining on top of that, right sides together, clip it all the way around, and then just sew all the way around that giant rectangle, leaving an opening for turning in the lining. And once I had sewn that, and that's another 1/2 inch seam allowance, once I had sewn that, I took it right side out, made sure everything was lined up and had gotten sewn together properly, and then I turned it inside out again, and I did another stitch just on the outside of the stitch that I had just done. And that's because, well, first of all, I just really want it to be sturdy, but also the printed fabric was unraveling a lot at the edges, and I thought that I would feel more comfortable if I just gave that another stitch all the way around. So once I had done that, I turned it right side out again, and still debating about that top stitching at the top of it. I'd love to know what you think. I just feel like it doesn't need it, and I'm not sure if it would add anything to it, but I am interested in opinions. Does it just look completely unfinished and unprofessional without it? That's not the only thing making it look unprofessional, I'm sure. So I just needed to stitch up the lining where I had turned it, so I just pulled that out, folded it, clipped it, and stitched that up. And then we just need to put the cord through. So I have here some cording, which I got at Amazon, and I'll include a link in the description. So we're going to cut 2 pieces of that, and I couldn't remember if it was 65 or 66 inches I was supposed to cut, so I think I cut 66-inch pieces, but the original pattern says 65 inches. So I cut 2 pieces of that, and I tied one end of one of them around a large safety pin, and then I just pushed it through the casing. So you're going to do it, let's say we go from right to left through the front casing, then we go left to right through the back casing. Then we're going to do the other piece the opposite way. So tie that around a safety pin and go left to right through the front casing, and then right to left through the back casing. And then you end up with 2 cords on either end that you can tie together. So put one of them through that little tab at the bottom, and then do a square knot, right over left, left over right. Now in one of my prior bags, or maybe on both of my prior bags, I then whipped the ends together. I didn't do that with this one. I thought I would leave it looking kind of raw, but you certainly could do that just for a little extra security and so it doesn't fray. So here's the finished bag. I'm really excited because I like bags like this for day trips, and I really needed one with some water bottle holders and a zipper pocket inside. So my Adidas bag has the water bottle holders, but it isn't lined and it doesn't have any pockets inside. So I'm excited about this one. Please tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me any mistakes you saw me make. I need to learn. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.